Hi everyone, Brian Hodzik here with NCSI. Today I'm going to talk about Ivanti and the new integration that was just released. What's great about this integration is it's many integrations in one. It's actually something called iPaaS. That stands for Integration Process as a Service. And really what the goal of this particular component is to allow our Neurons for ITSM or Neurons for ITAM to go and reach out to other technologies in a much more easy and simplified way. In the past, we had to do things like, well, maybe use an API to be able to communicate with it, but that was sometimes a little bit more complicated for people that didn't understand, components like REST or JSON, things like that. So the iPaaS integration makes it very easy, just some drag and drop steps in order for you to integrate with these other modules. If you're a cloud customer, it's actually already inside of your tenant today. Now, you need to get a license in order to use this, but the integration inside of your tenant is already there, and you can start using it right away. Let's take a look at how it works. All right, so here we are inside of our Neurons for ITSM tool. What we're going to do is go into the settings and go scroll down here into right beneath the integration tools. You've got a section for iPaaS integration. You're going to click on that and open up the project section. Now, there's a couple different components that are created here. We've got projects, we've got connectors, we've got recipes inside of that. So you can see I've created a Virtrillo Corp project, or I could go create a new one over here. But I'm going to open up my existing Virtrillo Corp that I have created. In the upper right-hand corner here, you can see you can create, like we described, kind of recipes and connection. Let's walk through what those different components are. So first of all, we got something called a connection. A connection is the ability to talk to another system on the other side. So as you're scrolling through here, you can see we've got connections to a lot of different systems out there. Now this product, the Neurons for iPaaS, is actually an OEM relationship with the company Workato. So if you're curious about what are the different connections that we can use, if you go to Workato's website, you'll be able to see more of them. But as you're scrolling through here, you can see there's quite a few of them, right? A combination of both on-premise and cloud-based technologies. Now, right now, we just released this iPaaS integration. We can't actually support on-premise integrations yet, but that's going to be coming in the very near future. But as you can see, there's plenty of other things that you're going to connect to. If that's, for example, right here, Workday. Maybe you want to have a interaction with an onboarding workflow, and when a new employee gets hired in Workday, you want it to go trigger a process for us to create. Or maybe you're a Zoom shop, and when a user submits a certain request, we're going to provision them a license over from the Zoom ecosystem. So as you can see, we've got lots of vendors in here. You can search them up here in the top. Maybe you use Dropbox and you want to see if that's available for you. So, oh, yep, sure enough, right there, I can go and open that up. So let's go through and kind of talk about how you would potentially integrate it. Now, everyone's a little bit different. Every integration is going to be slightly different than others. For example, here, this one's pretty automatic. I'm just going to type in what I'm going to call it up here at the top. And I can, do some advanced settings down here in the bottom, but mostly it's just going to take me to Dropbox website, and ask me to authenticate. Other ones are going to be a little bit different than that. Let's open up, for example, Okta, a single sign-on provider. It's going to come down and it's going to ask me, okay, well, what kind of authentication type are you going to be? Oh, it's going to be, in this example, an API key. So I go to the Okta website, I get my API key, and I come back and I put it in here. So again, every single connection works a little bit differently. You're just going to have to go through and find out how each connection is going to individually work. You can open up the help guide over here as well. It'll take you to the help documentation. It talks a little bit more about setting that up. So go and create those connections. That's going to make it so that you can have them available inside of your recipes. So a recipe is what we're going to do to actually go and make some kind of automation happen. So let's go and open one up. Now, up here at the top, you're going to give it a name. My new recipe, I'm going to call this something like, maybe I want to, send a Teams message when a priority 1 incident is opened. Maybe I've got a Teams chat, and that's what my users are using. And when a priority 1 gets opened, I want it to kind of ding that Teams chat so that everyone can be aware that this is happening. Just kind of an example of one thing you can do. Really, the sky's the limit. You can see we've got lots of starting points down here in the bottom. Trigger from an app, it can run on a certain schedule. Maybe a webhook is called for it to wake up and start. We could go and call a different recipe, things like that. But let's just trigger for an app. Let's kind of use that built-in version. So what's going to happen here is we're open in kind of that same workflow logic that is going to be a lot of drag and drop, a lot more easier than typical API programming that we have. So on the right-hand side, you can see it says, well, you've already connected to these 5 apps. You've connected to Dropbox or Ivanti Neurons for ITSM. Obviously, that's the one that we're talking about here today. Entra ID or Okta or, even Teams here. One quick note, we need to have the Neurons for ITSM be one of the endpoints in every recipe that we create. Meaning I cannot create a recipe from Dropbox to Okta by themselves without Neurons for ITSM being involved. The license agreement as part of that OEM relationship with Workato means it's got to be Neurons for ITSM is one of the pieces of the puzzle. So just kind of keep that in mind. So, again, what would be this one? A priority 1 incident being created, let's go send a Teams message. So I could come and click on this Ivanti Neurons for ITSM, and what's going to happen is it's going to say, okay, there's 2 different options that you have available. You've got when it's a new record gets created, or if it's not just a new record, but also if a record gets updated. So, we'd potentially want to change it to updated, potentially a record could get created as a priority 3 and then upgraded to a priority 1. So in our example, it might need to be new or updated, but yours is going to be, very specific to your situation. So here I've already connected to my Neurons for ITSM, so I just need to click on it right there. Now, what's going to happen right here is it's going to show us, well, what object are we trying to talk to? In this case, we can use this drop-down list and say, well, yeah, we're going to either select a custom value. I need to go and type in incident or change or problem or whatever I'm going to do. But this select from list is really awesome, and let me tell you why. There's plenty of times that in the back end, we might call it something different. Do we call it a priority or severity? They mean the same thing, at least in our, in our nomenclature, but we might have it be a different actual back-end name versus what the front-end name is. So what's going to happen here in this list, it's actually presenting me with a list of all of the objects that it was given as part of the API. So again, that doesn't seem like it's a very exciting thing. What do you mean? It's just a list of all the stuff I have, of all the business objects I have. Well, in traditional API programming, you'd have to go do a large query or understand the table schema a lot better in order to do that. In this with the iPaaS integration, I don't need to know any of that. I just say, oh yeah, incident, that's what I'm after, right? So it's very, very simplistic to do this, and the tool is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me behind the scenes. Okay, here it's going to say, well, when are you going to do this since? There's plenty of times where I don't want to go and get a priority 1 incident that was open 3 years ago and send a message about that. That doesn't make any sense. So I could go hard-coded date. I could say, oh yeah, I only want to start this from, the 1st of this month or whatever. But if you look real close, I just usually use this when I'm doing it. Leaving this field blank will default the time to 1 hour ago. So especially when you're testing and things like that, that's usually a good default. Oh yeah, within the last hour, that's the only entries that would ever kind of wake up and do it. Then we've got a trigger condition down here on the bottom. And I'm going to guess that a very large percent of the time you're going to be turning on these triggers. Otherwise, it would be every single incident that's created. That's probably too many for our recipe here. So we're going to go down and we're going to set a trigger condition. Now, something kind of interesting happened right here as well. Look at this recipe data thing that just popped up there. What is that? What's going on with this? Talking about these data pill thingies. Well, again, this is where it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to our ability to understand how, what fields your tool is using and how do I map that against my tool, all right? So as we search through here, you're going to see it's going to tell us different things like here's the user ID and the username and things like that. But, if we're actually on this section right here, it's going to update to, what's being used in that particular recipe section. So when we're saying the trigger data right here, look what this is doing. It is showing, first of all, on the very left-hand side, it's like what kind of field it is. Like it says ABC, well, that's going to be a text field, right? Then it gives the name of the field, and you can see it right there. It even gives the API name in the back end. Look, actual category versus what the description is, which is actual category. And then it gives a sample data. Think of it like it went and pulled the first record, and it gave the sample data. The sample data is fantastic because there's plenty of times in here where you're like, well, I want to know what the priority is going to be, or the severity, or things like that. That's where it kind of can get confusing. Sometimes right here, this is actually pretty straightforward. Priority is called priority. Look, it even gives the sample number of 3 right there. So I can click and drag, watch what I'm doing, drag, 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 and I'm dropping it right there into the trigger data. So it knows, oh, I'm going to look at step 1, which was, the field called priority in that section. But if you scroll down here, I think some of the other ones like subject is a good example of one that, maybe you're not expecting that to be the name of the ticket, well, it's called the subject in here, and you can kind of see it based on what the data it provides there. So I really love this kind of preview section that we get right there. So on the right-hand side here, we decided to look at the priority. We're going to look at a condition inside of here. Let's scroll down here and get a little bit more real estate. So you can see we've got, down here, greater than fields, and if we're doing some mathematical things. But in our example, we're just going to say that it equals to 1. That's what we want to do with this one. When a priority 1 is created, we could do it. Obviously, we could have done, greater than, less than, et cetera, if we want a more complicated version of that. But pretty straightforward here. Okay, so now we've created our first step. Pretty straightforward. Every few minutes, look at incidents. And if the priority equals 1, let's do something. So now you can see, again, the straightforward nature of this, that I don't need to know what a JSON payload is. For those knowing, it's a fancy backend API way of actually parsing the data. You just don't need to know that. You just, look, you're dragging, dropping, grabbing fields. So what is the action that we're going to take? Oh, let's go and add an action. Well, are we going to do an if condition, or maybe we need to do a repeat, or let's go call another recipe or something like that? Or it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're just going to take an action in another app. So we could open up here and say, okay, well, yeah, let's go talk to Teams. That's what I want to do. I want to wake up and send a message to a Teams channel, for example, or whatever. It can be used to do anything. Let's just use that as our example. So here you can say we can get a username, we can delete a message, post a reply, etc., things like that. Like, a reply might be good later on when we close the incident. Wouldn't that be handy to come back at a later date and, post a reply to our original message to say this has been closed? But we're just going to do a straightforward one. We're just going to say post a message, right? So I've already created a connection to my Teams account. We already did that in the connection section, so I don't need to do that again. I could just click on it right here. And, again, it's going to go and do that logic where it's going to go and use the API and talk to the system, so I don't have to necessarily just go and put as a custom value. But if I had a custom value, I could go and put this inside of here. So again, when you're actually going and creating the message, you can see, well, let's go and add a block here. I want to have, maybe you want to have an image or text with a thumbnail or something like that. So, let's just put a text block in there. What is the block of text going to say? Well, maybe up at the top you want to say something about, P1 incident opened or something like that. And then again, I could grab these data pills over here on the side. Like, wouldn't I want to know whether they're a VIP or not? Or maybe I want to know what the ID is, or even a link. I could get fancy and have like a link to that incident if I wanted to, because this is the backend rec ID, but that's not very particularly helpful for most of our users. So again, this gives us the ability to search for that. Let me scroll back over there. But we can just kind of grab any block that we wanted to and drag it over there and put it in, in the section right there. So now it's going to say priority 1 open, semicolon, and then whatever the customer location or customer, ownership, or whether VIP or whether it's resolved or so forth. So again, you're just dragging and dropping fields and parking them in the different sections here. So if I want to do a mention of someone, I could go and do that kind of @ symbol if I get someone's attention and so forth. But the point being not how do I do the exact mechanics of sending a message via Teams. That's just more kind of an idea to get you thinking about potentially how this would work. If we go back over here to our projects, let's look at some that I've kind of already created as ahead of time. So I was actually clicked on the dashboard there, to kind of show us more about those projects, how many failures do we have, and so forth. But here I've got another one down here where maybe we're creating groups or accounts, or adding users to a group based on a task, or another one up here that we were creating an Active Directory group from a task. So that's one way I see this as kind of being used. When you're going in here and you're taking a look at a request offering that you have, if you're not sure where to start, I've got a new employee onboarding request offering that I have that goes through some logic and some workflow and so forth. And at one point, it creates a task. So a human needs to go and complete that task. So that's what these yellow boxes are right here. Create employee. A human goes into Active Directory or Okta or whatever and says, let's create that. Well, one of the options you could talk about is actually having that be the tasks is the iPaaS integration is creating that task. They're doing it instead of us. So that's what a lot of these are doing. Again, here's an example where we were creating a task. If anyone ever created a task and that task happened to have this value in it, iPaaS-group, then instead of the human fulfilling it, the iPaaS integration would go and do it. And otherwise, the workflow wasn't changed. The workflow could work exactly the same way, but the system would go and even go back and update that. It would say, oh yeah, you're right. Let's go and complete that as as a task. Thank you for watching today on the new Neurons for ITSM iPaaS integration here from NCSI. We appreciate you watching. If you have any questions about how the system works or you'd like a more hands-on demo, please reach out to your NCSI salesperson or click the contact information down below. We'd love to talk to you more about it. Thanks for watching.